Propaganda. I'm sure you heard that word, but what does it really mean? And is it something we have to be afraid of? Is it used for good or for evil? That's what I'll be talking about today. Welcome. On today's show segment, I'm going to be talking about these two topics. First, I'll be answering a viewer's comment about if I'm trying to get Americans jealous. Then I'll be discussing a new three-part topic, Propaganda 101. And I'll start with Nazi propaganda. So let's start with the viewer comment I got from Sue and Lathrop. Asked me, Vic, is part of the purpose of balancing the scales to get us Americans jealous? So Sue, you have deciphered one purpose of what this show is about. Yeah, you're correct. I go to great lengths to expose all of the wonderful family and social benefits that Europeans and the Scandinavian countries offer their citizens. Okay? The reason for that is, so we Americans will finally get jealous and start demanding from our representatives to create legislation that will provide the same benefits for us. Because all these great benefits are way cheaper to pay for through the tax system than they are to pay for them privately after tax. Because look, we're all human, we all have the same needs and wants. After all, why does America call itself the greatest country on earth, when most of us can't even afford to stay home for a few days when we get sick, or the cost of a short hospital stay? Just can't afford it. How about instead of just talking about being a great nation, why don't we actually become one? And we can start by voting for politicians that want to give us American citizens what we've never had. Real peace of mind, financial peace of mind, right? What am I talking about? Like providing us with universal health care, universal child care, government-mandated sick leave days, taxpayer-funded college education, and government-mandated maternity and paternity leave. All these benefits would prevent economic devastation in American families' finances. Okay? You know, the last time I checked, we Americans, just like our European counterparts, we need education. Like I said, we need education. We get sick, we have young children, and we got to take time off to be with our newborn family members. And we also need to be there for our elder parents when they need us. Okay? And we need to do all these things without hurting ourselves financially. And once we've done that, then we can re-examine our claim about being the greatest country on earth. You know, as far as I'm concerned, a great country is defined by how well it takes care of its citizens. Specifically, the least among us, right? But in general, how it takes care of all of its citizens, okay? From beginning to the end of life. Let's have a look at what France provides its citizens as far as economic benefits and security is concerned. Have a look at this bulleted list. France provides social protections for these 5 life risks. Workers get a pension, so they don't have to worry about old age survival risk. There's universal health care, so they don't have to worry about illnesses, disability, and disease risk, bankrupting them, and they're all well taken care of in their health system. And their health system is one of the best in the world. Taking care of maternity, young children, and child care. Those are also risks that come along and you got to pay for. Not an issue in France, as far as paying for them is concerned. Employment risk. I have a much better system than we do here in America. It lasts a lot longer. And the last one is living in dignity. The risk of poverty. Okay, so there's a program for that. There's a social protection program for people in poverty. These are the kind of social protections we need in this country. After all, what are we? Second-class citizens compared to the French citizens? Okay? All right, on to our next show segment. Okay, in this show segment, I'm going to be starting a 3-part series on the topic of propaganda. I'll call this Propaganda 101. These 3 segments of propaganda will give you a basic idea of what propaganda is all about. So let's start from the beginning. What is propaganda? Let me give you an overview. Okay, so why should a show about economic justice and democratic socialism, which is what this show is all about, talk about propaganda? Simple. Because in order to have a life of economic dignity, you need to be aware, informed, think logically and clearly, so you won't get duped into getting ripped off. That's the reason why. You should want to make decisions based on facts, not emotions, just for your own self-interest. Okay? Trust me, you don't want anyone or anything manipulating you into believing anything other than what you believe to be true based on your own research and life experiences. Okay? Before I get started, I'd like to ask that you stick with me to the end of this 3-part series on propaganda. The reason for that is because at the end of the 3rd show, all the dots will have been connected to show you how believing propaganda has led and will lead to poverty. Maybe even your own poverty. The Germans during the last century learned a hard lesson about what propaganda leads to. And we Americans need to learn the same lesson as well. Because the Nazi propaganda playbook has been dusted off and is now being used in our country. More about that in the next show. But let me start by describing what propaganda is, and then I'll show you how the Nazis used propaganda to completely transform German thinking, to the detriment of that nation and its citizens. So propaganda is defined as information, often inaccurate information, which a political organization publishes or broadcasts in order to influence people for specific reasons. Okay, and drilling down, propaganda basically consists of half-truth or lies, simplifying very complex issues, appealing to emotion. Propaganda attacks its opponents viciously, and propaganda targets its audience with laser-sharp precision. To be successful, propaganda depends on the attraction of the message itself, how the message is packaged and delivered, and how receptive the target audience is to accept propaganda as fact. Gee, Fox News certainly comes to mind, huh? The last one, in my opinion, is the real key to the success of the Fox News network. Now let's watch this short video clip about Nazi propaganda. Come back and talk about it.
It also emphasizes the importance that Hitler and the Nazis placed on the spoken word. That Adolf Hitler believed that the spoken word, far more than the written word, was responsible for all the great events in history. It allowed you direct contact with your audience. That is, you could play upon their hopes, fears, and frustrations. You could get immediate feedback about what worked and what didn't work. And all that became important as you tailored your message.
How do you see this as relevant to today? I mean, what does this tell us about today's political propaganda, if anything?
An exhibition like this raises questions about how we address propaganda. Is it through restricting speech, or is it more of the American marketplace of ideas that is the best way to address what one might consider offensive speech? And also, how to evaluate all the information that we're bombarded with today, and how to make educated, informed decisions.
Okay, let's take an in-depth view now on propaganda. Let me start by giving you some historical background information about what happened in Germany in the 30s. You know, within months of Hitler becoming Chancellor of Germany, the Nazi regime completely destroyed that company's free press. It shut down hundreds of opposition newspapers, transferred Jewish-owned publishing houses to Aryans by force, and flat out took over and controlled well-established newspapers and other popular periodicals. There were daily directives by the propaganda ministries, press division, and it dictated what could or could not be published, under punishment of reprimand, loss of position, imprisonment, or even death. Yeah, even death. For example, Sophie Scholl and her brother, both German college students, were beheaded. Yeah, beheaded by the Nazis because they were circulating flyers in their university that were anti-war and anti-Nazi. Anyway, the oversight of radio, film, newsreels, theater, and music was the responsibility of the propaganda ministry, which used all of these media formats to sell the Nazi ideology. Okay, so how was all this Nazi ideology received by the Germans? Well, a gentleman by the name of Robert Musil, which was an Austrian writer in 1933, wrote probably the best response to that question, in my opinion. And this is what Robert said, and I quote, "Freedom of the press, expression in general, freedom of conscience, personal dignity, intellectual freedom, and all liberal fundamental rights have all been eliminated without a single expression of outrage among the citizenry." End of quote. Basically, many Germans during the 30s had been so mesmerized by Nazi ideology because of the cleverly produced propaganda that they conceded their basic rights and long-treasured personal freedoms. Now, there is a mistaken belief by many Americans that the lessons of Nazi Germany have been learned and what happened there will never be repeated and could never happen in America. And that's no longer true. At least not as far as propaganda is concerned. If it happened before, trust me, it'll happen again. You know, the propaganda that the Nazis created was so powerful that pretty much all of its signature elements have been resurrected by one of America's political parties, to the detriment of our country. Well, that's the show for today. Thanks for watching. Next week, I'll be talking about these two topics: the social and family benefits in the Netherlands, and I'll discuss how Nazi-style propaganda is currently being used successfully in one of America's political parties. So until next week, remember, you deserve the government you vote for.